Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to create a variable and then store some values into that variable for my Google Home Minis volume so that I can turn the volume to 100% before speaking a command and then setting it back to its previous value. So the first thing we're going to do is go into the rules machine, and we're not going to be creating a global variable because this variable that we're making only needs to be accessible within this rule. The only time you create a global variable is if you need it across different kinds of rules, like let's say you have 3 or 4 rules and it needs to pull a value from a different rule. So we're going to actually just going to create a new rule, and then we're going to call this test volume. And at the bottom here, you're going to see there's a local variable. And so when we do create this variable here, it's only going to be available to this rule. So we're going to create a local variable. And now you can name your variable anything you want that's descriptive so you know what that variable stores. To me, I like to start mine with var for variable and then call it what it's storing. So volume. But you can really call it anything you want. And then we have to tell it what type of value this variable will be storing. I know that the Google Home speaker has a value of 0 to 100 for the percentage for the volume increase. And then we have to set an initial value for var volume. So I'm just going to set that to 0. You can set it to whatever you want, but the very first thing we're doing is overwriting this value. And then as soon as we put that in, it's now saved. And now just to remember, anytime you want to use this variable somewhere within this rule, you have to use it like this. Use the percent sign, the variable's name, and then a percent sign. So now we're done creating a local variable. So the first thing we're going to need to do is create a rule, or an action, sorry, that will go and get the volume setting. So we're not going to do any trigger events here. You can set that up for whatever you want. So underneath actions, I am going to set a variable. And if you don't see this option to set a variable in here, it's because you did not create a variable in the previous step that I showed. So just make sure if you don't see this option, you go back and you create that variable. And then it's going to ask us what variable do we want to use. We only have one. And we want to use a device's attribute to store in this. And I'm going to choose my living room speaker. And the attribute that I want to pull from it is its volume attribute. And so now this value will be stored in the var volume when this action runs. So now we have stored the volume value. Next thing we're going to do is turn up the volume. And we are going to set the volume. And we're going to set the volume on the living room speaker. And we're going to set the volume to 100% because we want to hear the message that's going to play. And we want to make sure that the volume wasn't set to 2 before we spoke our message. We're done with this action. Now we have told it to turn the speaker to 100. The Google Home is a internet connected device, so it will take some time for that command to get to it and for it to run that command. So I like to add in here a delay of 1 second just to give it time to make sure it received the command. So I choose the delay actions here, and I tell it to delay actions by 1 second. And what this does is it makes sure all the actions below this are now delayed by 1 second. I'm done with this action. Now the speaker's at 100%. We want to speak a message. So we're going to send or speak a log message. And we want to send or speak a message. And we're going to put, this is a test. And we're going to go down to our speech devices. And we're going to choose the living room speaker. So now we said this is a test. We want to give the speaker the time to receive that command and to speak that command. So I'm going to be adding in another delay here. And we're going to delay this, let's say, by 3 seconds. You may have to change this based on what your normal internet speeds are, how fast this action happens for you, and depending how long your message is. If it's a longer message, you may need to delay this by longer so that you give time for the speaker to speak your whole command before we turn the volume back down. Because if you just said turn the volume back down as soon as we spoke the message, however long it takes for it to get that command to turn the volume back down is halfway through your message, it will turn the volume back down to its original state and you're not going to hear the rest. So I'm going to set this to 3 based on just, I wrote this as a test. I'm going to say done with this action. And now we want to set the speaker back to the setting it was before this, which is why we are using a variable. So now we're going to set volume, and on the living room speaker, and instead of putting an actual value in here of 0 to 100, before, as I explained to you, we're going to type in var, because this is how we access our variable. So whatever is stored in that variable will be replaced, this text will be replaced with that value. I'm going to say done with this action. And now we're going to look at our whole action here. We're going to set the variable volume to the living room speaker's attribute called volume. Then, once we have that stored, we're going to set the volume on the living room speaker to 100%. We're going to give it a second to receive that command and execute it. And then we're going to speak on the living room speaker. This is a test. We want to give it 3 seconds so that it can get that command and execute the speak. And then we're going to set the volume on the living room speaker back to the variable that it used to be. Back to the variable that has the volume level that it used to be before we ran this action. So I'm going to say done with this. And I'm going to open it back up so that we can test run it. And I'm just going to walk over to the speaker here so you can hear it. So I'm going to run actions.
This is a test.
So you can hear there that the volume went to 100%. It said this is a test. And then it went back down to the value of 55, because you can see up in the rule here that this is what the original value was before we ran our test. So this is how you would store a value and then restore it after you have altered it. I hope this helps everyone.